I want you to close your eyes for a second. Seriously, just humor me here. Imagine you are standing right in the middle of the Saudi Arabian desert.
Okay, I am picturing it. Very hot, I imagine.
Unbearably hot. It is the height of summer, so we are talking 110 degrees Fahrenheit easily, blinding sun, endless shifting sand everywhere, and then slicing right through that absolute emptiness, you see a wall. But not a normal wall.
No, not even close to a normal wall.
This thing is 500 meters tall. That is significantly taller than the Empire State Building, and it is clad entirely in glass mirror, so it reflects the desert back at itself. It almost disappears into the heat haze like a glitch in the simulation. But the wildest part is not the height, it is the length.
Yeah, that is where the scale becomes genuinely hard to process for a human brain.
It stretches for 170 kilometers. That is 110 miles, a single continuous building just cutting across the Arabian Peninsula like a scar. And inside, no cars, no streets, just 9 million people living in this climate-controlled, artificial, eternal spring.
It sounds exactly like the cover art for a 1970s sci-fi novel. Or what, maybe a fever dream.
It really does. But for the last 5 years, this was not fiction. This was the line, the absolute crown jewel of Saudi Arabia's Inno mega project, the most ambitious construction project in human history.
Without exaggeration. The budget, the engineering, the sheer hubris of it, it was pharaonic. It was meant to be the pyramids of the digital age.
But we have to use the past tense now, don't we? Because today is Thursday, February 26th, 2026, and the world looks very, very different than it did when those glossy, futuristic renderings first dropped a few years ago.
It certainly does. We are sitting here in early 2026, and the narrative has shifted fundamentally. We are not talking about when they will finish it anymore. We are asking what went wrong and is it really, truly over?
And that is exactly our mission today for you, the listener. We're not here to just gawk at the cool concept art, although we will definitely talk about how wild it was. We're here to conduct a post-mortem. We have a massive stack of sources for this deep dive. Confidential internal audits that leaked reports from the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg, deep mathematical studies from the Vienna Complexity Science Hub, and the project's own turbulent timeline from its big announcement in 2021 to the suspension news that hit us late last year in 2025.
And what I absolutely love about this stack of sources is that it covers the full spectrum of why things fail. We have the physics, like why a line is actually a terrible shape for a city. We have the economics of where exactly $1 trillion went. We have the human cost, which is the part that so often gets buried under the CGI videos and the hype.
So welcome to the deep dive. Let's figure out how the city of the future became a ruin before it was even finished.
Let's do it.
To understand the fall, I think we have to understand the height of the ambition. Let's rewind to the beginning. 2021. The announcement drops. And the market, I mean, I have never seen anything like it. It was everywhere.
It was inescapable. YouTube ads, Instagram billboards in Times Square. And it was effective, too. They were not just selling real estate. They were selling a completely new paradigm of human existence. The core pitch was something they called zero-gravity urbanism.
Zero-gravity urbanism. It sounds incredibly cool, but let's unpack that for a second. What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, think about how traditional cities work. They're two-dimensional. They sprawl out. Think of Los Angeles or Phoenix. Endless suburbs, massive traffic concrete paving over everything. The line of proposed stacking the city vertically. So you have a footprint that is only 200 meters wide.
200 meters. That is incredibly narrow. That is what? Maybe 3 city blocks?
Roughly, yes. But because you stack it 500 meters high, you minimize the land use. The pitch was that you protect 95% of the surrounding nature because you are not paving over it. You are just slicing through it with this narrow wedge.
And inside this slice, the promise was essentially a utopia. I remember the specific claims so clearly. 0 cars, 0 streets, 0 carbon emissions.
That was the Civilization 2.0 pitch. The idea was that by eliminating cars, you eliminate the noise, the pollution, and the danger. Instead of traffic, you have the 5-minute city.
Right. We hear about the 15-minute city in urban planning all the time, like in Paris or Melbourne. The idea that you can walk to your grocery store or school in 15 minutes, but they wanted to cut that to 5.
Yes. The claim was that all your daily needs, clinics, schools, shops, parks would be layered vertically within a 5-minute walk of your front door. You just take an elevator up or down, walk a block, and you were there.
Which sounds fantastic. I mean, who doesn't want that? But here is where my brain starts to itch a little bit. If the city is 170 kilometers long, what if my job is on the other side? What if my best friend lives 100 kilometers away? Walking 5 minutes is not going to cut it.
Exactly. You cannot walk 100 kilometers for a cup of coffee. And that is where the spine comes in. This was the technological backbone of the whole project.
The spine. Sounds a bit ominous, actually, doesn't it?
It does a bit. It was an underground transportation layer beneath the city modules. They promised a high-speed rail system that could take you from one end of the city to the other, the full 170 kilometers in just 20 minutes.
Okay, I want to pause there because we need to do some back-of-the-napkin math on that claim. 170 kilometers in 20 minutes.
Right. Let's look at the velocity.
If you do the division, that implies an average speed of 510 kilometers per hour.
Which is fast. Very fast.
That is faster than the maglev in Shanghai. That is faster than the TGV in France. And that is the average speed.
Correct. And that distinction matters immensely. Because a train acts like a bus, it has to stop to let people off. You cannot just teleport from point A to point B without stopping. If this train has to stop at stations to actually serve the 9 million residents along the line, it has to decelerate, stop open doors, close doors, and accelerate again.
So to maintain an average of 510 kilometers per hour with stops, the top speed would have to be what? Sonic the Hedgehog speeds?
It becomes physically impossible very quickly, or at the very least, biologically uncomfortable. The G-forces required to accelerate and decelerate that frequently just to maintain that average speed would make your morning commute feel like a roller coaster launch. You would be spilling your coffee on the ceiling.
So right off the bat, in the glossy brochure, we have a massive physics problem.
We do. It was a promise that sounded amazing, but just crumbled under basic scrutiny. But the vision was not just about transport. It was about intelligence. This was supposed to be a cognitive city.
Cognitive city? That means AI, right?
Massive AI. The proposal was that the city itself would be watching everything. It would use predictive models to anticipate your needs before you even had them.
Like the elevator knows you are running late, so it holds the door, that kind of thing.
On a much grander scale than that.
Yeah.
But there was a detail in the leaked documents that I found fascinating and honestly a little dystopian. They proposed that residents would be paid for their data.
Paid? Like a wage?
Sort of. The documents suggested a model where your data, your location, your health stats, your consumption habits was a commodity. By submitting it to the central city operating system, you would receive credits or direct payments.
That feels incredibly coercive.
It does. It reframes privacy not as a fundamental right, but as a luxury you simply cannot afford to keep. If you are low income, can you really afford not to let the city watch you flush the toilet?
Here is your paycheck for letting us track your heart rate all day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But again, in the marketing phase, this was spun as ultimate efficiency, the city that knows you. It was the absolute centerpiece of Saudi Vision 2030. We really have to remember the geopolitical context here.
Right, Vision 2030, this is Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's baby. The goal is to get Saudi Arabia off the oil IV drip.
Precisely. They know the oil era is ending eventually. They need to diversify their economy. The line was supposed to be an economic engine, a free trade zone, a tourist hub, a tech incubator. They projected it would create 460,000 jobs. They projected it adding billions to the domestic GDP. It was not just a home, it was a massive business plan.
A business plan wrapped in a giant mirror.
A very, very expensive mirror.
So that was the dream, a linear, eco-friendly, AI-powered paradise. But as they say, plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. Or in this case, maybe the plan was the core problem from the very start, because when you actually look at the geometry of a line, it gets weird.
It gets very weird. And interestingly, it is not a new idea at all. We found this really cool historical context in the source material. The line was not the first time someone tried this.
Really? Who else was crazy enough to try to build a 100-mile-long hallway?
Well, go all the way back to 1882. A Spanish urban planner named Arturo Soria proposed a linear city based on tram lines. He thought cities should just grow organically along transportation routes. It was very practical, very industrial for the time.
Logical enough for 1882, I suppose.
Then in the 1950s, Yona Friedman proposed a spatial city. But the really relevant one, and the one that makes the line look incredibly ironic today, is from the 1960s, an Italian avant-garde architecture group called Superstudio.
Superstudio, that sounds like a Marvel villain lair. Or a really intense disco club.
Their concept was called the Continuous Monument. It was this massive grid-like structure that wrapped around the entire world. It looked almost exactly like the line monolithic mirror-clad, totally featureless.
So A&M just copied their homework.
They copied the aesthetic, absolutely, but they missed the point entirely. Superstudio's Continuous Monument was satire.
Wait, really?
Yes, it was an art project designed to completely critique modernism and capitalism.
Yeah.
They were essentially saying, if you carry modern urban planning to its logical, rigid conclusion, you get this soulless, horrific wall that destroys nature and individuality. It was a warning. It was dystopian art.
And Saudi Arabia looked at the warning and said, let's build that.
Let's put a $1 trillion price tag on it. It is the ultimate irony. They tried to turn a dystopian architectural critique into luxury real estate.
That is mind-blowing. It is literally like building Jurassic Park after reading the book and thinking it is an instruction manual. But let's get away from the art history for a second and look at the hard math. Because there's a very specific reason we build cities in circles or blobs, right?
There is. And to explain this, we have to look at a brilliant study from the Complexity Science Hub in Vienna. They ran a massive mathematical simulation comparing the line to what they called the circle.
Right, line versus circle.
They took the exact same population, 9 million people, that took the exact same square footage. And they asked a simple question. How easy is it to see your friends?
Okay, basic urban connectivity.
Right. In a linear city that is 170 kilometers long, if you pick two people completely at random, the average distance between them is 57 kilometers.
57 kilometers, that is a haul. That is not, let's grab coffee. That is a planned day trip.
Exactly. Now take those exact same 9 million people and push them into a circle with the exact same density. The radius of that circle would only be about 3.3 kilometers. The average distance between two random people drops to 2.9 kilometers.
Wait, 57 kilometers versus 2.9 kilometers.
Yes, it is a factor of 20. The circle is mathematically vastly superior for connectivity. It minimizes travel time by its very nature.
This completely undermines the 5-minute city promise. They said everything would be close.
Some things would be close. Your local grocery store might be close. But your choices are severely limited. In a circle, you have 360 degrees of options to explore. In a line, you only have two directions, left or right.
And the Vienna study looked at active mobility too, right? Like walking and cycling.
This was the most damning part for me, honestly. In the line, because everyone is spread out so incredibly far, walking is basically useless for anything other than visiting your immediate next-door neighbors. The study found that only 1.2% of the population is within walking distance of you.
So you are totally isolated from 98.8% of your own city unless you get on a train.
Correct. Whereas in the circular model, 24% of the population is walkable. So the line forces you to be entirely dependent on the transit system. And that introduces the massive issue of resilience.
It's a single point of failure.
Exactly. Imagine a fire, mechanical breakdown, a terrorist attack. In a normal city like London or New York, if a subway line goes down, you take a bus, you hail a cab, you walk a different route, you literally go around the block.
But in a line, there is no around the block.
There's only the line. If the spine breaks, the city is severed. It is paralyzed. You cannot route around the problem. From a systems engineering standpoint, it is incredibly fragile.
It feels like they chose the shape strictly because it looked cool on a map or in a rendering, not because it functioned well for actual human beings.
That is the textbook definition of form over function. And we have not even touched the environmental impact yet.
The zero carbon promise.
Which heavily refers to operations. Like, once we build it, it will run on solar. Great. But building it, that is a gigantic carbon bomb.
Because you have to build a glass wall 500 meters high and 110 miles long. That requires a lot of stuff.
Philip Oldfield from the University of New South Wales ran the numbers on this. He estimated the embodied carbon, meaning the carbon emitted just to manufacture the materials, the steel, the concrete, the glass, would be around 1.8 gigatons of CO2 equivalent.
1.8 gigatons. That is hard to even picture.
To put it in perspective, that is more than the annual emissions of the entire United Kingdom, 4 times over.
So you basically burn the planet to build a city that promises to save the planet.
It is the ultimate paradox of greenwashing on a gigaproject scale. And then you have to consider how you are killing the local ecosystem. Let's talk about the mirror itself.
The giant bird killer.
It is a 500-meter-tall, continuous barrier. Migratory birds fly across Saudi Arabia all the time, millions of them. They do not have radar. They just see a reflection of the open sky.
So they just fly right into it.
It cuts crucial migration routes entirely in half. It stops land animals from crossing the desert. You are effectively building a dam, but for biology instead of water. It completely contradicts the whole living in harmony with nature branding. It is an ecological severing of the entire landscape.
We have talked about the math, the physics, the birds. But there is a much darker side to this story that we need to address. Because when we say building in the desert, we tend to imagine empty sand, just dunes, Lawrence of Arabia-style emptiness.
But it was not empty. And this is the part of the deep dive where we really have to get serious. This land in the Tabuk province is the historic homeland of the Huetat tribe. They have lived there for centuries long before the Saudi state even existed.
And you cannot build a 170-kilometer-long city without moving the people who are currently in the way.
You can't. And the displacement process was, well, brutal is the word used by human rights organizations like ALQST.
Our sources highlight reports of forced evictions, entire villages being bulldozed.
But it goes beyond just losing property. There was actual violence. We need to talk about Abdul Rahim al-Huwaiti.
This was back in 2020, right? When the project was just barely getting started.
Yes, April 2020. Abdul Rahim was a resident who absolutely refused to sign the papers handing over his home. He became a sort of accidental activist. He started posting videos on social media.
I remember seeing descriptions of these videos in the source material. He was documenting the security forces physically surrounding his house.
He said, and this is a direct quote from one of his videos, "I would not be surprised if they come and kill me in my home and put a weapon next to my body and say he was a terrorist."
And then what happened?
And then shortly after, he posted that he was shot dead by Saudi special forces.
Inside his own home.
Inside his own home. The government claimed he opened fire first. But given his videos predicting exactly that scenario, it sent a massive chill through the entire region. It was a very clear message: get out or else.
And it did not stop with him, unfortunately. There were literal death sentences handed out.
Yes. In October 2022, a specialized criminal court sentenced 3 members of the Huetat tribe, Shadli Ibrahim and Atullah, to death.
Sentenced to death for what exactly? Terrorism.
Murder. The official charges were vague, related to disrupting the peace and opposing the guardian. But effectively, it was for resisting the eviction, for getting in the way of the line.
It is genuinely hard to reconcile that reality executing people to build a futuristic utopia with the glossy marketing videos of happy families and the lush indoor gardens.
It creates a severe moral cognitive dissonance. And it had real tangible consequences for the project. Western companies started getting very nervous about the optics.
I read about solar winds in the Bloomberg report.
Right, a major corporate partner. They pulled out specifically citing these human rights violations. They said their ESG charters, their corporate ethics rules, simply would not allow them to participate anymore.
And then you have the architects jumping ship.
That was a huge blow to the international prestige of the project. Sir Norman Foster, for instance, one of the most famous architects alive today, he was sitting on the advisory board. He quit. Francine Hubin from Mekane, she quit. They could not put their names on a project that was literally killing people to break ground.
And we have not even touched on the rights of the people who would actually live there eventually. We mentioned the AI surveillance earlier.
The surveillance city aspect. Digital rights experts like Vincent Mosco were sounding the alarm from day one. When you combine a state with a very poor track record on human rights with a city infrastructure literally designed to track every footstep, every purchase, every heartbeat.
It becomes a panopticon, a digital prison.
It does. If the government can sentence you to death for refusing to move, what can they do with a complete immutable log of your private conversations and movements? The paid-for-data scheme just looks like a massive trap to get people to sign away their civil liberties for convenience.
So we have a project that defies physics, destroys the environment, and tramples human rights. But historically speaking, if you have enough money, you can brute force your way through a lot of problems. And Saudi Arabia has incredibly deep pockets, so what actually killed it?
Money ran out. Or rather, the patience for spending it did.
Let's look at the timeline of the collapse, the unraveling, as we call it.
So 2021 to 2023 was the pure hype phase. Excavators were out there moving sand. They were digging a massive trench along the entire 170-kilometer length. It really looked like it was happening.
But by 2024, the rumors started leaking out.
The scaling back phase. Yeah. This was the very first crack in the mirror. Bloomberg broke the massive story that the first phase, which was supposed to be a significant chunk of the city, had been severely cut.
Cut by how much exactly?
They went from promising 170 kilometers down to just 2.4 kilometers.
2.4. That is just an airport runway. That is not a city. That is basically a large shopping mall.
It was a 98% reduction in scope overnight. The population goal dropped from 1.5 million residents by 2030 down to maybe 300,000 if they were lucky.
What caused such a massive sudden drop? Was it just global oil prices dipping?
Oil prices fluctuate, sure, but the real issue was the budget completely ballooning out of control. Estimates for the total cost started hitting $1 trillion. Even the Public Investment Fund, the PIF, the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund, They blinked. They realized the return on investment just was not there.
And then came the internal audit in 2025. This is the juicy corporate drama part of the deep dive.
Oh, the audit was absolutely devastating. The Wall Street Journal got their hands on the details. It was not just a case of, hey, we are over budget. It was a case of we are being actively lied to.
The report specifically found evidence of deliberate manipulation.
Exactly. Project managers were under immense pressure to meet completely impossible deadlines set by the Crown Prince. So they were essentially cooking the books. They were hiding delays, underreporting their costs, and vastly overstating their progress.
It is the classic dictator's dilemma. If you bring the boss bad news, you get fired, or worse. So everyone just lies and says everything is great off until the whole thing inevitably collapses under its own weight.
Precisely. And the final collapse came in late 2025. In August, the PIF officially wrote down $8 billion on its giga projects. They basically admitted publicly this money is just gone.
And then the date that matters most for this timeline, September 16th, 2025.
The day the diggers finally stopped, the PIF issued a formal suspension order. Work on the main construction sites completely halted.
And that brings us exactly to today, late February 2026. What is the status right now on the ground?
Pure silence. The international media is broadly calling it a likely failure. There are thousands of migrant workers stranded in desert camps waiting for back pay. The executives like CEO Nabil Nasser, they are long gone, fled the ship.
And the high-profile architects who stayed on, firms like Zaha Hadid Architects or Morphosis.
They are still technically contracted, sure, but their designs are just gathering digital dust on a server somewhere. Yeah. Beautiful renders will live forever on the internet, but the actual steel is not being ordered.
It is a truly staggering story. In just 5 years, we went from the biggest architectural announcement in human history to a silent, empty trench in the desert.
It is the ultimate arc of hubris. It is a modern-day story of Babel.
So what is the grand lesson here? What is the core takeaway for you listening to this?
I think it is a profound lesson about top-down versus organic urban planning.
Expand on that a bit.
Real cities, places like London or Tokyo or New York, they are messy. They grow organically over centuries. They start as a small market at a crossroads or a natural port. They expand, they contract. They constantly adapt to the actual needs of the people living in them. They are biological in a way.
And the line.
The line was completely imposed. It was a strict mathematical abstraction forced onto the real physical world. It prioritized the visual impact. The Instagram shot the mirror wall reflecting the sun over the functional reality of how humans actually live and interact.
It tried to force humans to fit the architecture instead of building architecture to fit the humans.
Exactly. And physics always wins in the end. Economics always wins. You simply cannot design a complex society in a vacuum.
I want to leave everyone listening with one very specific provocative image. You mentioned it in your notes earlier, and I cannot stop thinking about it. The hidden marina.
Yes. This is by far the most honking image for me from all the reports. One of the very few things they actually finished digging was the massive hole for the hidden marina. It was supposed to be this huge artificial harbor inside the line where all the billionaire yachts would dock.
They moved millions of cubic meters of sand just to dig this out.
Millions. A giant empty basin carved into the crust of the earth, just waiting for water that will never ever come, waiting for luxury yachts that will never be built.
And now?
Now the desert does what the desert always does. The wind blows, the sand moves.
It is filling back in.
Slowly but steadily. In a few years, it will just be a slightly weird depression in the dunes. Nature is completely reclaiming the dream.
It is the ultimate modern ruin. A massive testament to ambition without foundation.
Dream or dust? It looks like the dust definitely won this round.
On that somewhat cheery note, thank you for guiding us through this absolute wreckage of a project.
Always a pleasure to dig into the details with you.
And thank you for listening to this deep dive. If you enjoyed unpacking this massive failure, keep your eyes on your feed. We will catch you on the next one.